Beautiful. Okay, for a second, Sean, you were just not moving, and I thought you had frozen, or I had frozen with everyone. In any case, let's see. I have recording going. Only overall announcement I have is that the PyHC AGU session was accepted. I sent that information out to the email. We'll get it on the website soon. And yeah, if you are hoping to attend AGU at all and have something you want to submit to that session, please do. All right, Sean, go ahead.
Alrighty. And before I start, maybe just to remind me, what presentation were we gonna get from him before he left to do that panel last minute?
Andres Munoz.
Yeah.
Um, he had just a project idea in general he wanted to float to the community, but wasn't sure if it should be a standalone thing, if it should be incorporated into another package, that kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah, that's right. And I don't think he ever told me what the idea was, so I
I don't know too much about it, but he had wanted to use some telecon time to talk to people, but it's okay. We will
ah,
present again.
well then I guess yeah, I'll just remain curious for like one more month. Okay. So anyway, yep, that guy had to bail last minute for those people who joined shortly after 9. So instead, I'm going to share my screen here, and I've got two things to show off that won't take the full hour by any means. So that this will be a shorter telecon, but I've got a map of GitHub to show off for a second, which is just fun. And then I've made an automated PyHC standards evaluator to evaluate PyHC packages or potential PyHC packages without really much human involvement. And so I'll show off how that works. But anyway, let's just start with something fun because I was just watching YouTube videos over the weekend, like I do, and I came across this project called Map of GitHub. And I'm curious, has anyone seen this before? Or am I? Yeah, raise your hand on Zoom if you have seen this before. I was watching a talk by Andrew Karpathy, which he was like, he used to be the head of Tesla's AI, I think, then got acquired by, I think, Meta. He's the guy who invented the term vibe coding, which you've probably heard now. But yeah, he was showing this off in some random talk, and I thought it was neat. And what I wanted to bring up here is, so this is basically all the GitHub projects mapped together into little islands, basically by stars from the repo. I think their logic is if people star the same projects together, they're more likely to exist together in this thing. But I found that we here at PyHC have our own little like island in this map of GitHub, and I found it fascinating. So if we zoom in over here on Jaxian land, and then if I keep zooming further, Astrospectrum, I remember, boom, you start to get to this little cluster here. And if I click SunPy now, you get this web of connections that go up here. And if you start to look at some of the package names over here, that's going to be pretty small font. I don't know if there's anything I can do to increase the font size on that, but I see SunPy, SpacePy over here, PySpeedass. If you click on these, they start to expand out more. So clicking PySpeedass reveals PyTplot, CDFlib, Speezy, ApexPy, PySat. You can just kind of look around at the things here, and it just so happens a lot of the PyHC packages were in this one little spot. So this just visually shows you that we have our own corner of the internet. And I see a hand raised. Sandy?
Yeah, I was just wondering when you pan back how they came up with the cutesy names for clustering things. Did they do the clustering and then just come up with cutesy names like Jaxian land?
I have no idea. All they really offer right here without digging into the repo is that each dot is a GitHub project and they're clustered by stars basically. But I would have to dig in deeper to find that answer.
Thanks.
It is kind of cute though, isn't it? And even over here off to the left in the middle, there's not that much that I recognize. I see Hermes down in the corner of this little astro spectrum bit. But it'd be interesting, if people want to see this right here, I will go ahead and paste the link. And I think these coordinates attached to the link will even get us close to the area of the map we're looking at if you wanted to check around. But you can search by package repos. Like I searched SunPy first to find this little blob, then didn't really have to look anywhere else to find any of the other packages. I just thought that was a neat thing to show off, it's not guaranteed that we would have actually been clustered like this, but it turns out we are. Yep. And so there's not really much more to show about that. Just thought that was a fun thing to talk about. If anybody has any feelings or thoughts to share about that, feel free to. Otherwise, I will move on to
So, well,
yeah.
of the other ones in that grouping, are there ones we don't know about and should, or?
I had that same question. It would be a worthy exercise for one of us to go through here and pick ones. Like there are certainly things in here I don't recognize, like whatever that is. And maybe some people don't. But yeah, this could be an interesting way to find potential new PyHC packages just by seeing if they're like heavily clustered around here and we haven't, talked to them yet. I like where your head's at. Alrighty. So, anyways, let's talk about this, shall we? And maybe if there's anyone on the call that has a PyHC package or maintains one and is willing to like look at the reports that were generated from this, I'd be interested to hear about it. But let's just say what I did first. So PyHC Standards Evaluator is now a repo in GitHub you can go to. I will go ahead and put this in the chat as well. It's just underneath our Heliophysics Pi GitHub organization. And what was I going to say? This is basically using AI to generate reports of how well a package holds up to the PyHC standards. And I kind of had this aha moment because I've been using particularly like the coding agents in the command line, like Claude Code or Codex CLI. I've been using them a lot lately to just get work done and to ask questions about PyHC packages. And it occurred to me, I have an AI agent that understands any repo I throw at it and that is working for me autonomously to get, changes done or work accomplished using them. Why don't I just give them the documentation that we already have for grading projects? We have these, project review guidelines that everyone who submits a package has to follow to do their self-evaluation. Well, I can take that document and the standards document, and then in a prompt that just says evaluate package using these guidelines against these standards and follow this report format. I made a little PyHC evaluation report format thing that just gives some structure to how it should be output. And I'll show a demo of it actually doing its magic in a little bit, but you get out these great reports when you ask it to do this. And because it only takes about a couple minutes for them to generate, I've had time in the time since I created this repo to go ahead and run it through every single PyHC package. So now in this reports folder over here, which I will also paste into the chat just for convenience, there are now auto-generated, very detailed reports on how every single PyHC package stands up to our standards. And I've glanced at some of them, and for the most part, they do agree with what is in, the self-evaluations on the projects page right now. But I think it grades a little harsher than people tend to give themselves in the self-evaluation. So it came up with some interesting findings. But this is the kind of thing that we get from this right now. And of course, the format could be changed to whatever we want if we wanted some kind of different format over here. But I thought long and hard about what I would want from a professional evaluation of a package. And it's basically got this title that just starts with the package name, a bit of metadata like the package version, the GitHub repo that it used, and the evaluator. I feel like it's important to know which model is doing this thing. So Claude Sonnet 4 is what I did all of this with, but you could give the exact same prompt to, OpenAI's O3 in Codex CLI, for example, if you wanted a, different or more capable reasoning model to do this. Table at the very top with the standards grades. I'm showing off SunPy here to not air anybody's dirty laundry in front of the group. SunPy gets like 100% perfect evaluation on all of this, which is no surprise. A little executive summary on what the package is and how well it stands up to the standards. And then this detailed assessment that just goes point by point in what's in the standards document, even with like little asterisks next to the ones that are a must in the standards and versus the shoulds, which do not have these asterisks. And those should versus must rules apply into how it gives the good versus partially met badges. And so you can just see how it's doing for all these sub bullets in the 6 different categories. And then at the bottom, it'll just give you recommendations for the idea is how to meet the standards fully. So in the places where you're failing, what should you do to make it better? But in SunPy's, there's nothing to recommend really. So the best it came up with was documentation metrics to show what percentage of code is covered by documentation, kind of like code coverage. But, there you go. So we can now get reports like this on any package. And maybe if you are on a call right now and you are a PyHC package developer, I would encourage you to look through those reports while I do this demo here for a minute and kind of glance through the evaluation that's been given to your package. And then after my demo, I'm going to call on you to basically, I want to hear if you agree or have qualms with any of this material that was written in your evaluations. Because I have found that these models look at files much more closely and do a much more comprehensive review than certainly any of the self-evaluators I would imagine are ever doing. It's more in depth than I have done myself with any of the packages. So I'm expecting we would find the info is pretty good. And so far, I have not really seen any major hallucinated um, facts in these reports because I do have it cite, its findings from everything. But anyway, let's show off here on the left what this kind of looks like. Can I do Command plus to make that bigger? Yeah, a little bit. So let's just recreate SunPy's evaluation here, shall we? So I can show you what it looks like. So I'll clear this. So I am in this repo right now under PyHC packages. I have cloned all of the packages to do this, and then I'm in SunPy's repo. So here, I'll do it with Claude again, just for the sake of doing things the same. So if anyone hasn't seen this before, this is kind of this general UI that the major AI labs have settled on for doing their CLI agents. So over here, I can type any prompt and it goes off to the model and it can, agentically do things to the repo. So I'm going to go ahead and copy paste the prompt that I had in there. Whoop. So evaluate SunPy using these guidelines. I point them to the guidelines against these standards and output your report following this format. And you know what? I'll just go ahead and say save your reports to the reports folder too. Actually, no, I won't do that. It'll probably figure that out on its own, but just to avoid trying to overwrite it, maybe I'll just have it output it wherever it feels like. So very simple. You just give that prompt to it, and then it goes off and it does some reasoning. I will evaluate SumPy against the standards. Let me start by reading them. And in the first few times that it starts doing things for you, it'll kind of ask for permission. So I'm going to say, yes, you are allowed to read these 3 documents from my computer. And then I'm using the option to don't ask again. So if it wants to go off and read more files, it will. And it comes up with this to do here. I'm going to examine the code base structure, evaluate the different kinds of standards it's talking about. It just seems like it's listed all the different 6 categories and then generate a comprehensive evaluation report. And so what's amazing about this is that it will just start perusing through a repo kind of like a human would. So it lists the contents of the repo first. And it's reading the README, which is a reasonable place to start, looking at the pyproject.yaml. And, I'm not going to read everything, but here it looks like it's just looking at all of the files in the root directory of the repo along with the README to get a sense for where am I. And it's going to start doing a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to just basically hit yes through all of this. There are other, less safe ways to run these kinds of tools where you can just auto accept every single change and have it not ask you yes or no questions. But I figured for the sake of this demo, it would be worth showing off, that at various points you can kind of steer this if you need to. But this will go for a while, and it'll basically just, this is going to go point by point from the community standards, the documentation, testing, software, Python 3, and license. But to do this, it's actually reading and going off of the questions. So if I look at the evaluation report over here, maybe, in the detailed assessment, for example, under community, it's looking for things like, is the code publicly available on GitHub? Does it duplicate existing functionality? Are there contribution guidelines in the environment? Is there a contributor covenant compatible code of conduct? And it'll look for every single one of these files and check yes or no and give a little check mark warning or X for each of these points. And it'll go as far as to, I just saw for a second a web search came across. It'll go and it'll, search online to look at documentation URLs to make sure there's documentation there. It will read the code of conduct to make sure that it is compatible with the contributor covenant. That's hard for me to say this morning. Look, even right now, it's asking me, I want to go fetch the code of conduct from sunpy.org to read it, and I'm going to say yes. It'll also do things like check PyPI and Conda for the package to tell you whether or not it exists in these things as part of the report. And this can take anywhere from, 2 minutes to I've seen like, 5, 7 minutes or so, depending on how deep it goes into every single one of the points. It looks like it'll be doing a pretty deep dive into SunPy, so I might just leave it open on the side for a little bit and bring in some discussion of other evaluations that have been made if anybody feels like raising their hand. Has anyone had a chance to look at their packages evaluation?
Yeah, I looked at the one for PySpeedas, and that's I feel kind of gassed up. It's saying we're excellent.
Were they? I want to take a look at it over here. Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, we didn't have a single bad thing to say about PySpeedas, did we? So we're just giving you all good on everything and probably coming down here and saying PySpeedas represents an exemplary PyHC package that fully meets or exceeds all community standards. Good job, Jim.
Yay!
Yeah, so yeah, I'm looking at Komodo, so it seems, yeah, agreed to what we do in our self-assessment as well. So Komodo is a mixed bag, so we know that, and you can see that here. So we have no automated testing, and versioning and tagging is kind of lacking. And we are aware of that, and we have to find good methods to do that. Maybe I have to look at more successful packages or more advanced packages like SunPy or Speedas.
So it's catching the testing infrastructure as the biggest thing, but then I'm noticing it did notice that you actually do have unit tests for this Verb 3D model, just not the other 25 plus model readers. So
yeah, that's unique because there was a contract and they were developing it rigorously on their own. So it's a contributed package that we haven't developed in-house. So the model developers of this word model actually worked on it and then contributed this part. And so that could be an example of how we could implement testing in our other packages. And
Totally.
yeah, that's CI and like continuous integration and continuous. Yeah, we are kind of weak on that. So for that reason, last time you, Sean, were introducing like a template of an empty package, and it has maybe hooks into how to do the tests and all this stuff. That would be a useful resource, so we can actually work our way to a more compliant.
Certainly. And, I will say, I see the hand up, so I'll get to that in just one second. This fits into a broader, you know, I've been trying to automate more and more of the kind of stuff that we do here at PyHC. And this is like a step in the direction towards, having a one-click button to, get help applying PyHC standards to a package and do kinds of things. Like now that we have a list of everything that could be done to bring it up better, you can imagine running this same list of recommendations, maybe even through a tool just like this, and say, hey, help me get up to speed, and maybe even use this repo template as a starting point. And maybe you don't have to be doing AI for all of this, but the fact that we can help people like this, and it just gets easier and easier as we get this kind of tooling and this kind of information. I like the direction. Angelin, what's up?
Hey, I was just scrolling through a few of my packages that you had evaluated,
Mhm.
and I have to say that the recommendations are inconsistent and sometimes incorrect.
Inconsistent and sometimes correct. I was imagining we had to find a few of those. Do you have?
Yeah. Um, any person who had actually looked at this with a checklist would have done a better job.
I tend to remember we were giving goods over a lot of your packages. Like what?
Oh, yeah, no, they're all good. Like,
Yeah, but let's see
I'm
how.
I'm quibbling about the process and the stuff. Um, like for example, in ACGM, it says I should add issue templates, specifically bugs and features, of which I have both.
Of which you have both. Aw.
For Apex Pi, it's saying I should have a conda distribution. I'm not going to do a conda distribution for any of mine at the moment, but certainly not for that one. But also, it's not saying that for the other packages. And it should, if that's a should that you want to recommend.
Mm-hmm.
So that's inconsistent. It's not incorrect, it's just inconsistent.
Yep, that kind of makes sense. I think the only places where it's being asked about Conda versus pip is in this releases check on software maturity. And since these AI tools are a little bit non-deterministic, I bet maybe sometimes it's just checking for reasonable URLs for Conda and pip,
That's
and
a little bit dangerous.
and then yeah, so there's definitely randomness that you get out of here, and I like to know that it can fail sometimes. So like
It's definitely failing.
did not find your issue templates. So that's one for me to write down in the notes.
And did find things that didn't exist with Conda for the other ones, which is also very concerning.
Yep. So I'm not for those exact reasons, I'm not going to recommend that we, fully automate the process of evaluating packages and rely on them and etc. I'm thinking more like the main place I'll be using this now is for new packages. Because maybe once every few months we get a pull request on GitHub saying, hey, here's my self-evaluation for my new package, and I've never heard of it before. And it's like, hey, do you want to let me into PyHC? I'll probably be doing this as a first step to see, does this evaluation more or less agree with what the person's self-evaluation is, and then I can go in myself on the points that they disagree and verify as a human where they do or don't. And it'll just significantly speed up getting a handle on what a package is and how well it's coded from the very get-go. I think there is at least some cases where it can like get you past an obviously bad repo in like 1 second. Maybe how about I'll call out an example of a bad evaluation on a good package. We have this Savic package, which is like a machine learning kind of thing, and their GitHub repo is not actually their Python project itself, but it is a bunch of notebooks that use the code, and the actual structure of the Python package only exists in the PyPI files. So we get these required improvements all over the place for everything except it's compatible with Python 3, and it talks about right here at the beginning, clarify the purpose of this repo, determine if this is the actual package or just a tutorial collection. And if it's just a tutorial repo, you should resubmit the actual package. If it's a package repo, well, it needs an init.py file and proper package, blah, blah, blah. And, give some thoughts about the scientifically valuable contribution of the work, but the fact that this seems to be the wrong kind of repository for the code. And so that's like, maybe I could see that myself if I just glanced at a repo, but at, the maybe 80 to 90% correct level, these things can evaluate packages and are looking at a lot of things. I would still say more comprehensively than, a volunteer evaluator probably would. And this just gets better with time, right? Using Claude Sonnet 4 for these evaluations at the moment. Claude Opus 4 does exist, which is an order of magnitude smarter and spends more time reasoning through these things. I actually didn't really have the usage credits to run that model on every single package, which is part of why I didn't do it. But, we can revisit this in a year or something, and maybe they'll be hallucinating less and doing better. And anyway, that pretty much gives you an idea of what this is. There's not too much more to say about it other than that it exists. And this has been going off on the left for quite a while. And it's still not done yet, so I don't know if we need to sit around here and wait for another SunPy evaluation to get generated that will inevitably just say good across all packages with lots of evidence for why it's good. But yeah, that's kind of the thing. I will pause for questions and comments and also consider if there was anything else that I wanted to say on the topic. Well, maybe how about I'll ask a question to the group. Is it just surprising for anyone to see that this is possible? Ooh, I'm seeing it's now I'll generate the comprehensive evaluation report. Has anyone like not seen these agentic tools for the first time? Or is this kind of like a yeah, of course you could do this kind of thing?
So, well, I like it. I know that these things can be done, but the labor is actually implementing it, which is good. But as the questions came up, the other thing is ensuring it's accurate. And that may also be something laborious that needs to be done. Spot picking, getting some volunteers maybe from 3 or 4 repos and saying, hey, here's the eval. Can you spot check and tell me the accuracy so we can, because you say, oh, it will get better with more data, but if you don't give it appropriate feedback, it will not get better with more data.
Well, yes and no. Like in our specific domain, it won't if no one's giving it feedback. But in general, if this were being done by like an artificial superintelligence, hypothetically, you would imagine it would hallucinate less than, a 2025 large language model might.
True, but you're making it so people will actually read this and take it. So you can't say, oh, the results are terrible, but they'll be better in 5 years when we get
No,
the Star Trek computer.
you sure cannot.
So I would say, build confidence on it by getting volunteers to get feedback on specific package evals. and then we
Yep.
could see better where we're at.
So can we still see my screen here? I've opened up Visual Studio Code.
Yes.
This is the new evaluation that it just came out with. So done on 6/30, that's today's date. Yep. No surprise, it is good and everything. And we could go through available on PyPI and CondaForge. Are those URLs going to be correct? That didn't open in the screen I'm sharing, but yes, that opened to an actual Conda package. Let's see what the suggested improvements were this time. It was documentation coverage last time. Now it thinks enhancements that would strengthen the package are enhanced contributor onboarding. Consider adding a GitHub issue template for bug reports and feature requests. You know, I'm going to bet SunPy actually probably does have that. So whatever web searching it's doing on GitHub, I'm just going to guess that it doesn't actually look through the area of GitHub that has issue templates, etc. So it's probably hallucinating the information about issue templates. Documentation tutorials, while documentation is excellent, additional beginner-friendly tutorials for specific use cases could further lower the entry barrier. And performance documentation. Consider documenting performance characteristics and optimization guidelines for large data set processing. Fascinating. Either way, the project requires no critical improvements and should be considered a gold standard for scientific Python package development. What do you know? Well, that's what it looks like, folks. And between that, maybe there was one more thing I'll say and then I'll stop ranting. Was even with this exact code that I'm using right here, the exact tool is called Claude Code. They can make this a GitHub Actions thing. So if we wanted to automate this, this is the instruction page right now for how you would add this as a GitHub Actions thing. There's actually a /install GitHub app command I could run right here to do it. And then you could @Claude in issues or PR comments or in just GitHub Actions pipelines. So you could imagine right now I could stick this in GitHub with my API token, with my API key, sorry. And there could be a button, you know, when you're submitting a new package, for example, generate standards report. And you could get a document like this automatically. Now, that would be slick for the reasons we've talked about on this only being about 80-90% correct. We might not want to pull the trigger on doing that yet, but this kind of tooling does exist, and there's already an infrastructure around how to bake it into the ecosystem in an automated fashion. So in a few years, we could be doing very, very fancy things like this. And now I think I'm done talking about it.
I can't remember if you said you were already doing this or you thinking about doing it. But would you consider doing like a few shot setup where you give it an example of what you think is a good evaluation as a benchmark to base something off of? Do you think that might help?
Oh, certainly. And earlier in the development of this, like when I was making the report template for how it should follow this, I was kind of tuning what I wanted it to say and improving the language in some cases where I saw it was failing by doing exactly that. Like I was saying, here's 3 examples of reports that I like, do it this way and don't do it this other way. And I had a collection of reports where it had messed up on some things. There's no like feedback loop really. So, you know, I'm not like retraining the weights of the model according to the feedback. So there's no like long-term learning, but in like one prompt, if you wanted to few shot it, for example, you could. Or I've even done it once before. It just uses up my usage credits more, but you can have it generate the report and then go back through and then for every single point spawn off a new AI agent to verify that that statement was correct. And sometimes it will catch hallucinations. So you can get fancy like that. And Jeff, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I did notice one other thing with regards to the inconsistencies where I'm seeing, just comparing like PySat and PySat CDF, which both use the same unit test coverage system. And one of them says, this is great. And the other one says, you need to add something to track the coverage of your unit tests.
Nice. So it's looking at like the exact same test bed and coming to different
As
conclusions.
far as I can tell, like both of them have the badge on the front page. Both of them are integrated into coveralls.
Yep.
And both of them have a command to run with coverage in the GitHub workflow. Yeah, the test coverage percentage not documented appears limited.
But it is there.
And we go to PySat and it's gold stars all the way. Coverage tracking implemented with coveralls integration and PyTest Cov, and like that's what both packages do that.
And there you go.
And like I don't know if it's something else. I mean, it could also just be indicative of something else broken, right? Because there's other things that need to be updated elsewhere. But
yeah,
that's a curious inconsistency I found.
Well, great. And I appreciate everyone who pointed out these things to me because I can look at the places where this fails and I can tweak the language and like the instructions and stuff to try to fix some problems. I don't really know that I need to gold plate this thing a whole lot and really try to get amazing performance out of it yet. But I've got notes written down for where some obvious spots where it's failing, and it saved me the time of having to go through and read these things myself and find them. So you all are helping me out in this telecon. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because I'm out of stuff. I'll give people a few more minutes to, maybe not minutes, I'll give people a few more seconds to start up another thread of conversation if you have it. Julie, was there anything else that we had to discuss today, or was that?
No, that was it. Double checking. Should be having another telecon in 2 weeks' time. Same time, same place. But other than that, I have no other big things to say here. Tool is interesting, and I'll be curious to see how it evolves in the future.
Absolutely. All right, well, thanks everyone. Appreciate you listening to me. And sorry our first talk got canceled. We will reschedule that as soon as we can.
Bye, everyone.